But I don't have the musical director skill. So I really admire a lot of musicals. My favorite one is probably Spring Awakening, which is a newer musical, and it's based on a German play, and it's a story about teenage sexuality and coming to terms with your sexuality. And again, I saw that when I was 15 and really connected with it. And it's a rock musical too, which I prefer because I think the music speaks to me more, instead of living in this classical world where everything's very prescribed. It feels a bit more rock and roll, and I really like that. I'm like the type of person that likes going to like music festivals and stuff. So if you can feel the music in a musical and you want to get up and dance with the actors, that's the type of musical I like.
We just saw Passing Strange on Broad Street,
Oh,
so
great.
it combines a number of things you named, the rock music, the British, the video, right? All rolled up into one, basically. It's interesting stuff. It was good. You liked it, right?
Yeah, I've heard really great things and really want this.
Do the college students know the academy's putting it on South Pacific?
No, they are. They're looking for young women especially. So if you're willing to be in a play, but they need young women and young men, South Pacific. So,
Even if you don't, not in it, go watch it. I mean, if you-
We can do that, right?
musicals.
I'll watch it.
look forward to today.
It's based on Tales of the South Pacific. The author is James Michener, who is from this area. And it's a great book if you ever read it, and the musical has stood up the test of time. It's become very controversial now because of racial stereotypes that were very prominent in the late 1940s and how they translate to today. But it's fascinating. If you ever go to James Michener Museum, it's his life and how many books he's written. And he was a naval officer, intelligence officer in World War II before he won the Pulitzer Prize for Tales of South Pacific, which became the great musical by, I think, any measure of South Pacific. So.
Yeah.
What do you think was your best work?
I think it depends if you're talking about directing or costume design. I usually like to separate those two things. And even like the resume you have here, normally I wouldn't put all of it. If I was submitting to a job, I would break it up based on what the job is.
Yeah.
But I think my best work, I like directing devised plays, which is where you don't have a script and you improv the script and then rehearse that improv, and then that improv becomes the script that you perform. And the first time I did that was a play called The Most Important Thing to Do Is Really Listen. And it didn't have a narrative structure, so it wasn't really about anything, but it was a lot of vignettes about how people communicate with each other. And it had dance in it, and it had scenes and music, and I created it with a group of people that I grew up with. And so I think because of those reasons, it felt really special to me. And it was the first time I had done that, and that's the type of directing I now do all the time. So I think that, I don't know if best in terms of product, like I don't know if the New York Times came to review every play I've ever did, that they would say that was the best one, but I think it was the most important to me artistically. Costume design wise, at Shakespeare Santa Cruz, the summer stock theater I worked at, designed a play called Tom Jones, which is originally a British play set, I believe it's the 1800s. And we decided, or I decided that British clothes are really ugly, so I made it a lot more French influenced, and made
What's the difference?
more colorful. The Marie Antoinette skirts with the pennés, so with the big poofy skirts you would see.
That works for me. Big
Yeah.
poofy,
Big-
I understand.
Big
The other words,
poofy
I don't understand.
and more this way instead of round, so they look like they have really big hips.
Okay.
But I think there were just a lot of really beautiful costumes in that one. And it's a fun story. It's this guy falls in love with a bunch of different women, and so it's really fun to see all those big dresses come to life on stage. Yeah.
I see here you have a certificate in nonprofit management.
Yeah.
How does that play into your career in arts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Villanova, one of the things that attracted me to their program is not only do you get a master's in theater, but you can apply to get a certificate in nonprofit management. And at the time, I was producing a lot of my own work, which happens a lot as a director. And I wanted to know how to do that in a way that's legal, first of all, so that you can ask people for donations and give them tax write-offs. And a way that didn't feel as much like me asking all of my friends and my parents to donate money just so I could do theater. I wanted it to feel bigger than that and feel more professional than that. So I got the certificate and I learned a lot about nonprofit business, which is not, I'm sure you all know, but the nonprofit sector is not just arts organizations, it's also charities, it's also the Red Cross, it's also, I mean, the list goes on and on. Anything that the purpose of the organization is to help people instead of make money. And it was incredibly humbling, because I think theaters often forget that our job is to help other people and provide entertainment and to provide a service to the community, and a lot of times artists get really caught up in, this is my idea, this is what I want to put on. So that was, even though I went into it from a business angle, there was a much more greater moral value that I took from it, which is how does theater serve the community. And it's something I've been thinking a lot about as an artist, and actually led me to pursue less administrative jobs and more teaching jobs, more community outreach jobs. So I don't know that that's exactly what the program intended. I think they kind of want you to go be a development coordinator somewhere, but that's what I learned.
Go ahead.
You mentioned teaching being one of the reasons why you took the path that you did.
Mm-hmm.
Are you looking to broaden your horizon in regards to teaching, or where you are now in the subject of teaching, is that where you want to be?
Yeah, so right now, in addition to design and directing, I teach a class with Theater Horizon to first and second graders, and that's wonderful. I also do their summer camps, which are a bit older kids, and I would love to continue doing that. I've considered the route of getting a PhD in theater, which again is different from an MFA in terms of a higher degree, in that it lets you become a tenured track professor at universities. So definitely down the line, that's something I'm interested in pursuing.
I had a question about the nonprofit certificate.
Yeah.
Is that something that you can get from schools while you're in a program, and you can get that on the side? Do you have to be a student at the school that offers the program?
I don't believe so. I think anyone can apply to get the certificate at Villanova. And it's really just a great versatile degree and a wonderful thing to kind of
And it's different from being admitted to a graduate program.
Yes. It is, you're taking graduate classes. So I don't have my Master's of Public Administration, which is what you would get if you only wanted to study nonprofit. I have a certificate which essentially says I did only the nonprofit section of that.
So it gives you a credential that then you can use with the rest of your background.
Absolutely, and it's really wonderful, again, if you're interested in any sort of nonprofit or government sector, because it also, MPA also goes a lot into how government positions work. So if you want to learn anything from how government finances work, I actually took a financial management course in that. It was very difficult and not what I was expecting, but a great way to learn how your business will be taxed if you're a nonprofit, and how you as an individual can be affected. It's also great in terms of, I took a marketing class. That really applies to any position you'll ever apply for, especially as a younger person, learning how to not just say, oh yeah, I know how to use Facebook, but how that is a tool an employable tool of you know how to market. I guarantee everyone in here is qualified to be a marketing manager just because you know how to use social media, and knowing how to spin that and say, I have this qualification is really, really helpful.
Alex, I have to leave, I apologize, but I have one quick question. It sounds like some of the things that you've accomplished have to do with one of our 5 cornerstones, which is leadership. So what's, in your opinion, the correlation between being a good leader and being a good director?
Absolutely. I think being able to listen to the people you are leading and understand where they're coming from. I have a really hard time getting people to do anything if I'm just yelling what I want at them. But if I can understand why they're having a difficult time with something, if I can talk it out with them, it helps them and it helps me understand how to help them. So that, I think, any type of collaboration is what makes me a good leader, I would say.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Absolutely,
You
thank you.
guys have a great night, thank you very much.
Yeah, I was getting ready to, I am gonna walk in the hall a second to get some water. How did you choose, which schools you were gonna go to? Our students are gonna finish Valley Forge and then do something next. They're gonna transfer to another college, they're gonna go into service in some cases, but what went into your thinking regarding either choosing the new school in New York or choosing Villanova here? And is your hometown California?
Yes.
So you travel pretty far to go to school. I'm just wondering if you remember when you were making those choices, just some of the things you considered.
Yeah. So when I was applying to undergrad, really wanted to be in New York City and really wanted to go to what my definition at the time was a prestigious theater school, which to me meant BFA. And then I didn't get into the acting ones and I thought, well, okay, I'll go to this program that's a BA, and completely changed my opinion on what those 2 degrees mean. And so yeah, location was a big thing for me in terms of New York, and I'm really glad I did that because I got so much from working in theater in New York City. And then with Villanova, it was much more focused on the type of degree, so I knew I wanted something that would allow me to continue to pursue costumes while I got more experience in directing. Kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, knowing how to sew was a really great asset in terms of employment. And people are much more likely to hire you to do costume design than directing. Is just something I found for me personally. And so I was at this point where I was like, okay, I could apply for an MFA in costume design and probably get into some pretty good schools and give up on directing. I could apply for an MFA in directing and give up on costume design and then maybe never make money again. Or I could do an MA, which will pay for me to go to school, and then I can learn more about directing and hone my sewing skills. And so that's really why I chose Villanova, is they offered me kind of the best deal. And another thing I will say in terms of pursuing a degree in the arts at a higher level, at a master's level, is to always look for the programs that'll pay for you. Because a lot of them will, either through assistantships like I did or through teaching. There's a lot of funding out there for graduate programs, and so if that's something that ever interests you down the line, make sure you're always asking about that, because the funding's out there. They really want to fund young artists. So. Other questions? Yeah.
No, I know you said that when you were a senior in high school, that's when you directed and wrote your own play. But what was the point before that that made you say, this is really what I want to do, like before senior year or before high school?
Mhm.
Was there a point where you were sitting watching something, or, I don't know, but.
Yeah, I never really had that because I grew up doing theater, so I grew up acting in plays. And when I didn't get into plays, I still wanted to be involved, so I would paint the set or build something or hang a light, like I just always wanted to be in the room. And I was really curious on how theater worked as a whole, because it's one of the only art forms that doesn't take just one person. Like there's so many elements that go into it, and I really wanted to learn all about it. So I was really always just bouncing around. And I think it wasn't until college that I realized it's like, oh, I'm directing a lot and I like this. And then with costume design, it was more like, oh, I'm getting paid for this a lot, I like this. So I don't know that there was one moment where I was like, yes, this is it.
So you say you were acting from when you were young. Was it something that your parents were involved in, or was it just like a hobby that you liked on your own and just you made a career out of it?
Yeah, so I actually had an atypical childhood. My mom raised me for the most part, and she was very young when she had me and was very interested in homeschooling and alternative education. So up until second grade, I was homeschooled, and through homeschooling found a program for homeschooled children that did theater. And so I really spent a lot more time as a young person performing and doing artistic things. And so that's really, when I say I grew up doing it, that it was really just like, I didn't go to school, I just only did theater and like gymnastics and other strange artistic things. That being said, I don't think you need to have a weird hippie art mom to be successful in theater. I think successful artists come from all sorts of backgrounds, and it can start at any point in your life. Like, you don't need to be a child star to like be a successful adult actor or a successful adult anything. Really, people come to it later in life all the time, and sometimes they're the best because you're not so like jarred by the profession. So I don't ever feel like you can't go out and audition because you don't have the experiences. You can.
What about the other things? Okay, we talked about producing, we talked about costumes. Can you talk more about set building and set creating?
Sure. That is something I haven't done professionally, but something I loved doing in high school. It's a big process. So like costumes, sets is something that takes a lot of different people. So you have the designer who will sketch out the set. This is really for costumes too. The costume designer sketches out the costumes. And then you have a technical director and crew who puts it together and physically builds it. And then you usually have a scenic painter who will come in and paint on top of the thing that's been built. So really you have at least 4, if not more, people involved in building sets.
So if you're interested in building and you're interested in theater, this is something that you could potentially get involved in.
Oh, absolutely. And I know a lot of people, actually another friend of mine who's a director, is really great with her hands and really great at building, and she's the production manager at Act 2. And through doing multiple things, she's been able to sustain a pretty healthy lifestyle as a production manager and person who builds their sets. And then she directs there now because they know her, and she's been able to network all throughout Philadelphia because, yeah, she builds and does this technical thing, but she's also a creative person. So being able to do multiple things, I've found, especially in Philly, can be really helpful in terms of just getting your foot in the door.
what's special about Philly in terms of this art scene that you have been connected to in California as well as New York? If we were, I cannot articulate to the students what the Philly scene is like, because I honestly don't know. I just don't know. I'm not immersed in it that way. And I certainly haven't been able to compare it to many other places, but I'm wondering what's special about the Philly scene? Is it more plays than movies or TV shows or?
Philly's very special in terms of art. It's a wonderful city for art, and it helps its artists a lot, which is great. I think Philly, the theater community, so there's a much bigger theater community, way more than film and television. And I've heard from film and TV people that it's hard to break in Philly because there's not as much funding and it's more expensive to film here. But in terms of theater, it's excellent because we have, there was an initiative from the Pew Foundation to start theater companies, I think about 20 years ago, and that's when the Arden started, the Wilma, like all these wonderful theaters that have now become like staples of Philadelphia. And then on top of that, you have a lot of younger, smaller companies. So it really feels like a community. There's a ton of work, which is excellent. People know each other. I've been in the scene for maybe 6 months now, professionally, not including Villanova. Every job I've gotten is because somebody knows Michael Hollinger, or somebody knows another person who works at Villanova, somebody knows James Imes who works there. And everyone's just willing to help out a friend. So there's really a big family in Philly. New York's not like that. New York, everyone's really busy and they don't have as much time to come see your play because they're working on their play. And it's a little bit, there's not the happy medium range. So Philly has a lot of mid-sized theaters, like smaller professional theaters, and even their smaller houses are still really nice. Like the Drake isn't super expensive to rent, but it's a really beautiful theater. New York has Broadway and then really tiny rundown theaters, and there's not as many in between. So it makes producing your own work difficult. And then LA is that to the extreme with far fewer theater people. So LA has Center Theater Group, which is their regional theater, and it's where Angels in America was first workshopped. I mean, it's a huge place, and they produce excellent Broadway quality work. A lot of their stuff ends up going to Broadway, or tours from Broadway go there. But it's really one theater company with 3 different venues. And then besides that, there are tiny theaters throughout, but it's so spread out that it doesn't have the community feel that Philly has. But LA has the advantage of being a great film place. So if you're interested in film, it's a wonderful place to go and get that experience. So it's really all just about what you're looking for.
And I wanted to do a quick survey of the students in the room. Is it film, is it TV, or is it the stage? That, how would you rank your interest? 1, 2, 3, film, TV, stage. Is it, what order would you put that in, right?
I don't know, it's hard. Probably stage, just because when I watch plays, it's like, I feel like I'm in a different, like, I don't know what it is, like I'm watching it right there instead of on TV. Like I like that, to be able to see them and almost touch them, you know? And then probably, what was the other?
Film, TV, and stage. Which order?
Oh, okay, probably film next.
Stage, film, and then TV. Sure.
Film, stage, TV. Simply because like I've done stage and I've also done a little bit of film, and I don't know, I feel more comfortable with film because I know that if I mess up, it's able to be edited out. Whereas on stage, I mess up, and let's hope everyone else didn't catch it. So that's mix a lot.
Good stuff. Cedric?
I like stage, and then I like TV, and then I like film. I really like stage the most. I like going out to plays and stuff like that.
Can you just say why you like stage, like theater the most?
Like, alright. So like, you know how those, like, you know how it's like, what is it? Shakespeare's or whatever, and you know like when you see it on TV, and like, what's one? But they killed him and
Yeah,
stuff,
what-
Julius Caesar.
Or Julius Caesar?
So like I've seen it on TV and then it's like I actually seen it in person and it's like it felt different in person. Like it
Mhm.
felt like more realistic and dramatic on stage than it was on TV. I like that.
It's more raw.
I
You
can
can see
see.
the emotion more and how real it is. And on TV, it's just a screen.
The screen is small, they're small. The screen is bigger, they're bigger. Yeah.
It would have to be theater, just because it's feel like more interactive, you really get the feel, and then TV because I like to see like a story like develop over time, and then film just because just film you could, like you can easily get it wrong, like I guess you could say.
Oh, film, stage, and TV.
Say a little bit about why.
Why?
What do you love about film?
I say the order I say it because I guess I like movies and that'll be the only thing come first before like stage,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like I'm comfortable in that type of order.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, what was it, film, stage, and TV?
Yes.
Okay, first one I have is TV because TV can like reach a wider audience, I would feel, because more people, TV is more casual than film, because more people watch it. Like suppose like you're on your way to work, or you're about to go to work or something, you just flip on the TV and like watch a show before you go to work. But like a movie, you actually gotta sit down and like make time for it. But movies are like really immersive, they can kind of get immersed in a movie more than that. But like theater's fine, there's nothing wrong with theater, it's just like, a lot of people don't really want to make the effort to actually go out to a theater, unless it's like a really special occasion, like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. But the emotion in the theater is there too.
Film, TV, and theater. Just like what you said, like you get more immersed with like the film, and like same thing with boys. Like you see character development throughout the process. Do the same thing with film. But you do that, and yeah, I just like seeing like new things like created for like film and stuff like that. Like watching, like they're watching something like new. Like you see like a lot of new things with film. But TV is pretty good. Theater is good too. I just think film is just up there.
And starting with you, Edward, and just going back the other way, in terms of what you love to do in terms of expressing yourself, acting, directing, costuming, or set building. Acting, directing, costuming, set building. Which two are the tops for you? What would you say that?
I would say like film and like set design. You said set, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, film and set. I can't act to save my life, but like, and I also can't sew. You know that, so I can't sew. So yeah, I like film and set designing. Cause like, I like working behind the scenes and like getting the scene in order, and like how we're gonna film it, what lighting I'm gonna use, how the scene gonna look. So yeah, set designing.
So I got two questions, like, one is, could you name it again?
Yes. Acting, directing, costuming, set building.
Another one is this like stuff that we're supposed to do, like what we're good at, or just stuff that we like?
What do you like?
Okay, so I probably would like set building the most, because you can kind of like I said earlier, you can get like immersed in the scene. Like if it's more realistic scene, or like the colors are real vibrant and stuff, like it's like, oh wow, that looks like really dope. Like, well, opposed to like if it's like a set, it's like a normal like kind of like run of the mill set. It's like, it's okay, whatever. Like you kind of just go past it. And like directing is also, I like directing because I'm not good. I just like the concept of it because it's kind of like you're like a, I don't know how to describe it, like, okay, it's like, you know, like, if you go to like, watch like a band play, like an orchestra or whatever, and like some dudes in the front, like actually like, you know, directing it, like that's actually kind of a cool concept, it's like you're like the leader of them, like, I don't know how to word it, you know what I'm saying?
Leader is the word you're looking for.
Yeah,
I
and,
like
and
that.
acting, of
I
course,
hear
is important, because like if it's bad acting, it's like, ooh, hey.
Kristen, you are the conductor. I hear you. What do you think? And I've left writing out, but acting, directing, costuming.
Costume and directing. Costume, one, I like seeing, I like dressing up. I like to get like fancy and things like that. I like the movies and things and films and see people get so fancy and dressed up, especially for me, classical movies. And
Like what?
Hmm?
Like what?
I'm like Western movies, like something like Tombstone. You heard that?
The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Hmm?
The Good, and the Bad, and the Ugly. That film. The Good, and the Bad, and the Ugly.
I didn't see that. No. All that Players, stuff like that. I don't know. But yeah, and directing, I like stage directing because you get to set like furniture and things like that up on the stage. So.
I would say acting because I guess it's just to get the out with your character and you know try to be someone else for a while. You know, just break out of your shell. And then writing, even though I'm bad at it, I feel like you know everyone has good ideas and like with the proper process to bring it together and make something beautiful.
I'm gonna be honest, I like theater and films and stuff like that, but I just personally don't think it's something that I'm good at. But it's like, I do like writing like dramatic things, like being extra, like plays, stuff like that, like I do like that, because I feel like I could uber exaggerate any normal life. And I guess with, the set design and stuff like that, I guess that's something I could go towards too, because like, I like to draw and I like to do artistic things, but I never done nothing like that before.
Are we putting in an order of what we like, or are we just saying two things, what we like?
You go with it. You grab hold of it and you ride the motorcycle.
My number one for that list would be acting. It's always been something I like. It was actually what I hoped to be growing up. I had to change it because I dealt with a few things that made me change my mind about it. But like acting will always be in my heart and one of the it's up there with basketball for me.
Yeah.
So acting for sure, and directing because I feel like you're in this position. Like it's your job to ensure that the point you're trying to get across or the idea that you're trying to get across is going to be clearly personified to your audience, and you're that one person who determines whether or not it's being acted out correctly or personified correctly. And if you get it wrong, everyone else gets it wrong. So I feel like it's a lot on your shoulders, but it's also a very interesting and important job to have.
See you doing it.
I grew up acting, so probably acting because I'm gonna sound like a crazy person, but like to take on the different personalities and become the personalities of each character. I don't know, I just find that exciting and I can go into that. I'm not crazy, I don't have personality disorder. But I like that.
No,
Mama, we're all crazy.
you're someone who's self-aware and has a sense of how to project yourself in different
Yes.
images.
I'm not crazy. So definitely that, and probably directing, because what you said, I like to bring it all together and to see each and every part go into one, like if you're working on, act one, scene one, and then, act two, and then watching it all come together, like, it's just exciting. And then probably building it, because I like you know, how it looks and to see if it's gonna be real, because I've been to so many plays where it's like, it's obviously fake and it really looks fake. So it doesn't even make the play look that good. But, yeah, and then costumes probably last, because I'm not good with all that dressing and stuff.
Alexa, in terms of anything that you want to make sure these young undergrads here for leaving your professional presence, and before we play Zip Zap Zop to close us out,
Oh my goodness.
what might you share?
Yeah, I want to address this idea of I'm not good at that, because I think it's something that comes up a lot in theater where people get really caught up in like, oh, we have to do this totally right, and like at the end of the day, you're adults playing make-believe, and like, that's really all it is. And you know, it's my profession, but it's really just that. And I think human beings are capable of doing so much more than we expect of ourselves. And I know for a fact, my first professional costume job out of college, I actually didn't know how to sew until then. Like I could do some hand sewing, I could sew a button, I didn't know how a sewing machine worked. And I really wanted this job, mainly because I really wanted to move to Santa Cruz and hang out with my best friend who already lived there. And I applied and learned at the job, and nobody guessed. Nobody really ever suspected it. So I'm not saying lie in all your job interviews, but I think theater, bend the truth a little maybe. But I think people are really capable of doing things if you just learn on the job. So don't worry about if you don't have the background or experience in it. Like, it's all art. There's no real right answer. You can just try it, and nobody is ever gonna get hurt doing it because it's theater. Unless you're using ladders, in which case, like, you know, review the safety rules. So, yeah.
Thank you. Listen, I'm gonna make sure that Samantha and Carl get to come back, because I'd love for them to both just talk about their undergrad experience, so you all can hear some other perspectives on just other colleges they've gone to. They haven't gone to acting programs, so it's a different thing, but that's just part of the reason I asked them to come here, because I wanted them to connect with the group and stuff. That said, we're gonna, say it again? We're gonna close out with Zip Zap Zop, and then we're gonna take a photo of the whole group, if that's okay.
Might be here.
And that's what we're gonna do. It's optional, but you know.
Yes.
So,